This event occurred in Khancoban, a small town at the foot of the tallest mountains on the Australian continent. The town is comprised of a few tightly nestled streets surrounded on three sides by the rugged wilderness of the Kosciusko National Park. Even from a map, the town looks like a couple of suburban blocks have been sliced off a city and placed on the edge of the Alps. The Kosciusko National Park is immense in area. It is genuine wilderness filled with deep ravines, snowy peaks, and ancient dark forests. This is an event and a date that has been seared into my brain as if by a branding iron. It is something I can't forget as much as I may want to. Twilight was arriving a little early that day. It was December 2024. The sky was thick with low autumn cloud that dropped light drizzle on and off. I had decided to take my dog for a walk somewhere different, much further than usual. It was going to be a long, cold night, and I wanted to wear her out so she wouldn't wake me too early the next morning. I didn't have to get up for work and wanted to make the most of the rare luxury. Previously, I had noticed a track leading off into the bush a block away from my cottage. I had never been up that way before. With the weather cooling down, there was little risk of the dog getting ticks, so I decided that this was the day to explore. We left the road and started making our way up the track through a sea of bracken. We continued on until the path disappeared from view into tall eucalypts. My dog went ahead as usual, sniffing and pulling on her lead. She abruptly stopped. I could actually see the fur standing up on the nape of her rust-colored neck. She began a very slow and deep growl. I had never quite seen her react this way before. I became aware of a chill inside, not from the cold, but something I couldn't put my finger on. It was inside, deep inside. I felt deeply afraid but tried to reason with myself and shrug it off. I looked around to see what could possibly be making the dog, and I feel so unnerved. Where we stood, the gargantuan gums above us were letting in just enough light to allow bracken and grasses cover the ground. I couldn't see anything out of place, but the feeling was there. I also noticed a smell. It was faint but acrid, reminiscent of burning fuses. The surface of the track was dry soil, covered in a thin layer of moisture from the day's occasional light drizzle. It hadn't been enough rain to really wet anything through, just coat leaves and soil with a dew-like misting of water. This made it easy to see the tracks I now noticed on the path ahead. The soil was disturbed. Obviously an animal had been there not long ago. I couldn't distinguish any recognizable prints. Animals such as wombats and wallabies tend to leave recognizable footprints as they travel across or along the forest tracks. It looked like whatever had been there was moving back and forth on the same spot. Or maybe there had been a scuffle between two animals. The dog's lead jerked my arm hard. She had stopped growling and was now pulling hard in the direction we'd just come from. I could hear her yelping above a new sound, a gurgling sound. I suddenly saw the bracken moving to the left of us. Out from behind the base of the nearest tree appeared something small but genuinely horrendous. The shadows were deep and undefined, but I could still see it clearly. I had no idea what I was looking at, but I will never forget it. A small being crouched before me. It was around the size of a 2-year-old child. The skin was a mottled gray and hairless. There were rough patches like it was beginning to peel from sunburn. The skin also glistened like it was slightly wet. It was crouched on the ground as if about to launch itself at me. I'm not sure how long I stood frozen in fear. The head had no ears or anything resembling a nose. A small lipless mouth was wide open, emitting the gurgling sound I heard earlier. Inside were multiple sets of jagged gray teeth, and small amounts of frothed saliva shot out on its breath. The toes of its hunched back legs were long and moving in an angry way, like long agitated fingers. It had 2 small limbs at the front. I guess you could say they were arms. They stretched out motionless. Unmoving long claw-like digits stuck out at the end of the sickly thin limbs. The eyes were beyond fearful. They weren't in proportion to the size of its featureless head, not in proportion for anything I have seen on this planet. They were large and dark gray. Elongated black pupils ran from top to bottom. I noticed with horror that they suddenly enlarged as the gurgling changed pitch. I became overwhelmed with an intense wave of nausea and terror. I noticed the dog was gone as I stumbled backward and fell into the long grass. I didn't look back. There was a ringing in my ears that could have been me or the hideous being behind me. I couldn't tell, and I didn't care. I got up and ran without looking back. I ran into town as fast as I could. I needed to be near people, anyone, just near other humans. I struggled to regain my breath in the post office, the only business still open. I talked to a friend who was working behind the counter. She asked if I was okay, as she looked at the dirt on my clothes and my obvious breathlessness. I told her my dog had run off and I'd been looking for her. I quickly changed the subject to her dog, which was beside her, nestled in a beanbag by the heater. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what had just happened. I still haven't. I found my dog waiting for me when I eventually arrived home. She was obviously very shaken up too. All these years later, I still haven't gained the courage to walk that track again. I have never told anyone in Khancoban of my encounter. It's a small town with a fast grapevine, as in all small towns. I suspect most residents would think me crazier than they already do, so I have kept this to myself until now. I just hope that no one else has to experience what I did that gloomy afternoon.